those are the two of the biggest things. Again, development. Would you want me to go directly into that topic of development?
You want to start with because during the
Sure.
forum, Enterprise Drive, the two buildings there were
Yes.
mentioned, and then also there's
Sure.
another property at
Roosevelt Road in
yeah,
Mannheim.
right.
Sure. So to give a little history, and I'll try to be as succinct as possible, the Village of Westchester purchased the property on Roosevelt Road with the intention of spurring some development there due to the fact that a gas station truck stop was seeking to make that purchase. The village board of that time in 2019 thought that a truck stop was not appropriate for that area. And the village board, shortly after in 2020, made the purchase of the property on Roosevelt and Mannheim Road. It's about 3 acres. When that purchase was made, a developer came to the village board. Village board signed an agreement which would include the property that we, as the village hall, as well as the post office, was sitting on, which is about 5.5 acres worth of property, possibly 6. That entire deal was set up, signed to, and negotiated. In the meantime, the village board made a decision at that time in 2020 to purchase the enterprise property with the intent of moving our village hall, police department, and public works operations to that location. When that decision was made, the village manager took on the task of beginning that process. And unless there's something that I am unaware of due to an executive session or something else more private, it was believed that that cost would be approximately $2 million to renovate the buildings and move us in there. What ended up happening as the village manager left in April of 2022, it was immediately clear that there was a potential problem where feasibility was just not, was an option, or I should say, feasibility was an issue in determining that that space was not going to suit the needs of the village hall, public works, and police department, nor was the cost of $2 million going to be able to satisfy the construction and rebuild of that property. So during that time, discussions were had throughout 2022 as to what we should do next. An attempt was made by me as village manager to get a feasibility study done, to have a professional guide us to our next stages. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. The board was undecided in how they wanted to proceed. The offer from the original developer for Mannheim and Roosevelt, the entire parcel, ceased in the beginning of 2022. And when that offer was withdrawn, the village went back to the drawing board and began speaking to another developer who was going to take on the role. And I believe it was in October or September of 2022. This could be found in our board meeting. We agreed to a letter of intent by another developer, JD Really. During that time, there was still discussion on moving into Enterprise Drive. However, a feasibility study still wasn't completed. So we ended up deciding at that particular time to pause, and there was some decisions to be made as to whether we could fit in there, what it would cost, and would we require other space beyond just Enterprise Drive. With that being said, I left in the beginning of 2022, initially just seeking out a retirement plan. I was discussing with individuals and began the process of running for office. Let's fast forward. I got into office. We hired our village manager. One of the first tasks was to determine feasibility of Enterprise Drive, as I stated in the forum in 2023. That process was completed and presented to the village board in January of 2024. And in January 24, it was determined that the space provided at Enterprise Drive, or the space allowed at Enterprise Drive, would not be feasible for the operations of the village hall, public works, and police department. And a complete redevelopment would cost upwards, with contingency, of $15 million. So the process was stalled for a moment, and a developer came in offering to purchase Enterprise Drive. While they were seeking the option to purchase, the village board signed an agreement and began the process of allowing the developer his due diligence period. That due diligence period was an extensive timeline, in part because zoning changes would be required. As brought forward by the developer, a kinder care style not branded, but KinderCare style environment would be the use of the building along with offices, corporate offices for that type of kindergarten environment. So in November, the developer came back to us and advised the board they no longer had the kindergarten care type environment and offices as an option, and sought to extend the contract, at which time the village decided not to. They couldn't provide us with the answer as to what use they had. They spoke to us about what was quote unquote a flex industrial, however, couldn't provide us with the definition of what flex industrial would mean to them, nor could they tell us what kind of tenants would be moving into that operation. With that being said, the village ceased the contract and did not renew or extend on November 12th, and said, we will seek other options and other opportunities. But because that property is a planned unit development, the only developer or the only business operation that could go in without a zoning change would be an office setting. That being said, anybody seeking to utilize that property or purchase it would have to go through the zoning process and get approval, not only from the Planning and Zoning Committee, but of course the village board as well, to move forward with that. So there are still interested individuals. However, we have not gone to the full-on marketing plan of that property. And the property on Mannheim and Roosevelt recently ceased discussions with JD Realty, and a plan to move forward is still being prepared. The biggest challenge with some of the marketing ideas is limiting what I would call the due diligence period. Mannheim and Roosevelt, for those who don't know, is a bog. What that means is the property is not stable, would require somewhere, and estimates do vary, between $2.5 and $4 million to stabilize the property of anything built upon it. With that being said, developers do have a challenge and will be requesting either TIF or tax incentives to build on property like that. So with that being said, we are still in the process of discussions, and we hope to be bringing somebody forward in the future. And if marketing can be done appropriately without putting us into a position of a long due diligence period, which is really the challenge. We need somebody who's going to come forward with the idea first versus coming and quote unquote kicking the tires and seeing what the property looks like before we begin full negotiations with either the Mannheim and Roosevelt, which right now at this very moment only the 3 acres is sellable and ready for sale, and the property over on Enterprise Drive, which is also 3 acres and would be an option to be sold. So there has been stuff that have been, there has been stuff that's been going on. Unfortunately, I know that the public is wondering why it's taking so long, and I completely understand. However, it generally falls within the due diligence period, as well as those we've talked to or agreed to have review the property, such as JD Realty, did not come forward with a full plan to continue negotiations to finalize what's called a redevelopment agreement. So that is where we stand on those pieces of property.
Thanks for that context. If I could go back, this ties to what a situation that could be ongoing. There was a period between 2021 and 2022 when Paul Nozick, the former village manager, was still there at the village.
Yes.
And apparently the board was under the assumption that Nozick and a team of people around him, including, I guess, Campagno LLC, which was a law firm that the board hired at his direction in 2021 to provide owners representative services.
Not a law firm. Not a law firm.
I'm sorry. I said a Lyle.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
Understood.
That they were doing that they were actually doing the work of renovating and eventually the board was surprised that nothing had been done. So between when Nosek had announced that this renovation was getting ready to happen, he had thrown out several figures until the time when the board got surprised and found out the building was empty. I don't know if you were still at the village, but are you
I
able to
was.
go into
Yes.
some into detail that doesn't
Sure.
uh, impede on any ongoing investigation? I believe that the state police are they still investigating this?
Yes. So, what I can tell you is that um, there were a lot of surprises. The uh, as heard during board meetings throughout 2021 and even into 2022, the plan was to move in March, in May, and then eventually the last statement publicly made, I believe, was June of 2022, and that the property was still in the process of the renovation stage. Upon former village manager Nosek's departure, I was tasked a week later and asked to step in as acting village manager. The board approved that at a board meeting. I don't recall if that was a special meeting or a general meeting, but I was notified that evening that the discussion happened to name me acting village manager. Upon being in a position of authority at that point, prior to that, just to be clear, and I know a lot of residents, asked this question of me. So to be very clear, I was an information technology manager. My role there was not in any other administrative role or having any details of what was going on regarding the facilities or buildings. I was, assisting in some ways regarding planning to um, make sure that the needs both of technology and in some cases the police needs were going to be met as we began that process of redevelopment. But in April of 2022, taking over roughly the second week of April, I asked that all elected officials come and one by one visited the enterprise site. And during that time, the elected officials, in most cases, were shocked by the fact that there was no activity other than demolition, and that things such as the HVAC units were displaced, walls were removed, and flooring was cut up and things like that. Without going into great detail, that there were just it was not in a state of improvement other than the demolition phase. Compagno LLC did come to our board meeting to describe some of the shortcomings, and I know he was challenged quite a bit by board members at that time as to why reports weren't being made to the board. And if I don't want to, hope I'm not going to misspeak here, but it's my recollection that Mr. Compagno said that the conversations would only occur between him and the village manager, as he was the point of contact. So at that point, it was determined that the buildings were in no shape whatsoever to be utilized in any fashion. So that's where things sort of stalled.
Were
There was a
you as
lot of
surprised as
questions.
some of the board members when you, or was there a moment where you were kind of shocked that?
I, I mean, I was shocked by the interior. Although I did, once or twice saw some of the demolition process as we were discussing layouts for the future. I was not in there, but a few times leading up to this, and yes, shocked that somebody who believed that we were on schedule. I firmly, believe there was just a misconception of what on schedule would be. At that point it was April, and if June was to be a move-in time, uh, just to give a little context, building offices is easy. It can be easy, and it can be something that probably is, based on a lot of, restoration work and things like that. However, a police department that requires holding cells, processing rooms and, a little bit more depth is involved in the construction, yes, I was a little shocked. Again, to me, you know, although I don't know exactly when I heard the numerics of what the cost estimate was out there, my concern came in because personally, feeling as if my capacity of IT would require roughly half of those costs, and that's on a full scale, from generators to all the necessary components of wiring, et cetera. I was looking at hundreds of thousands of dollars in addition to some of those other things, such as generators that would be hundreds of thousands of dollars. It concerned me, but in my position, I was tasked with doing what I was told to do.
In terms of the for rent, well, there's